windows all lit up on this dark December night, and after trying to find some shelter and some place to find maybe some food, he remembered that the church opened its doors every Sunday morning. And there he could get a cup of warm coffee and maybe a handshake and be out of the bitter cold. So he decided, why not tonight? Let me try. He went in, walked into the back of the church, and was somewhat ushered into the sanctuary, where he heard music and saw lights streaming. And there he stood as something he had never experienced happened before him. It was the annual children's Christmas pageant. There was a little girl all dressed in blue. She was holding a baby doll wrapped in white and looking at it tenderly. And then she set it down in this manger filled with straw. And the little boy stood behind her, looking on and trying to be just as interested as she was. Past him walked a little crowd of kids dressed in their dad's bathrobes. They were holding golf clubs and walking sticks. And they came up to this little family and said, "We're shepherds from way afar, but we heard that there's a baby here, and that he is to bring joy and hope to everyone. We just had to come see." So they came and stood by the little family. Next came a few more kids, this time dressed in a little finer robes. They were shimmering, and they held boxes of various sorts. You know, some spray painted in gold, others bedazzled with jewels. And they set these presents in front of the manger, in front of a baby, and bowed. And then joined the tableau. And finally came a small choir, rather a big choir, the smallest of the sort, all dressed in their finest Christmas attire, only to be magnified by the angel wings and silver halo on their head. And here we had all of the children before us, and they began to sing, "Angels we have heard on high." It was so triumphant, especially the eggs and the Chelseas and all of that. And then the pastor stood up and read a story the man had never heard. The Gospel of Luke unfolded this story of a man and a woman who went to Bethlehem, a far-off country, and had a baby. And had to put this baby in the bleakest of situations, even while people from all over came to worship and experience this child, this moment, this person who was claimed to be the joy and grace and hope, the peace for all the world. As the man stood looking at this tableau, he knew that this was something he had never seen before. And he was caught up in the mystery that is the heart of the universe. We are the followers, students, lovers, and yearners after God, the very mystery at the heart of the universe. And by this admission, we come in worship. We come to a place of holy expectancy and holy obedience as God pulls us, shapes us, renews us, and sends us out different than we were before. Worship is the very practice in which we discover the mystery, where we respond to this mystery, and how we can even acknowledge this mystery. Jesus said, "I will build the church," and proceeded to claim each of us. All of these, wildly, all of us messed up, unqualified, and unlikely people of history. And to use unusual methods of work, witness, and worship to fulfill that mission of sharing his message of love. In work, we embodied the vulnerable relational way of life incarnated in Jesus by being hands and feet, heart and head, for and with and alongside the least of these. By our witness, we let the secret out that the glee and surprise, gratitude and epiphany will just fill up the universe. And now in worship, we, the church, come full circle to the unique man as we recognize, praise, expect, and serve the holy. In worship, we find the center again and allow others to claim it too. Brother Lawrence hadn't been a churchgoer, a worship attender, a follower of Christ at all in his young life. It wasn't until age 18, when gazing upon a tree newly bursting with blossoms, that he recognized God's goodness, God's beauty and extravagance mirrored in what had up until recently been a barren tree. While he felt barren, he sensed God waking him up to a fullness imbued with God's grace, power, and providence meant just for him. Brother Lawrence began to work in a monastery at the age 25. He was uneducated and unable to become a monk, so they put him in the kitchen, peeling potatoes and washing dishes. He remained at these tasks for the next 55 years, or repairing sandals when standing up became too much. Since his busy job kept him from the scheduled worship services and the time of community prayer, he made the kitchen his sanctuary, developing a way of life he called practicing the presence of God. The time of business does not differ with me from the time of prayer, and in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, he says, while several people are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great a tranquility as if I were up on my knees at the Blessed Sacrament. Through all the hustle and bustle of a busy kitchen, and without any seminary, any training or authority telling him, Brother Lawrence held a holy expectancy, a conviction, hope, and certainty that as he sought God, worship through requests for grace and offerings of his whole heart, that God would meet him and fill him. Just come, he encouraged people. Just come with an attitude of love and deep humility. God is already here, waiting. The expectant heart and the mystery at the heart of the universe collide, and worship exists. Last summer, Mac music directed the Sondheim musical Into the Woods. So by default, it became a perpetual loop of a soundtrack in my own head. This musical weaves many stories of well-known fairy tales around the theme of wishing, wanting, happy ever afters, and a confusing doubt that follows. Included in the character list are a baker and the baker's wife, who venture into the woods to reverse a curse laid upon them so they might have a child. Throughout their search for ingredients for this antidote potion, they encounter Little Red, Cinderella, Rapunzel, and Princes Charming. At one such crossing, we find a prince looking for the fleeing Cinderella, and the baker's wife looking for a greedy Jack to hand over to the angry giant. The prince and the baker's wife meet. They lock eyes, and with suave and swooning, they kiss. The prince abruptly leaves the scene and the baker's wife, singing her jumbled thoughts. What was that? Was that me? Was that him? Did a prince really kiss me? And kiss me? And kiss me? And did I kiss him back? Back to life, back to sense, back to child, back to husband. You can't live in the woods. There are vows, there are ties, there are needs, there are standards, there are shouldn'ts and shoulds. Why not both instead? There's the answer, if you're clever. Have a child for warmth, and a baker for bread, and a prince for whatever. It's these woods. about the encounters of God, the expression of purposeful worship, and the impromptu praises. Worship can be like moments in the woods, delightful, surprising, core shifting. And yet, when we seek and gain awareness of such moments, many more than we might have ever considered, we see brilliance and transformative power that lies within worship. Something like that orb which nourishes and steadies us. And yet, when we hold this brilliance, it's like holding water in our hand as we hold the daily realities of life. How do we hold dirty diapers and the presence of the divine? Spaghetti dinners and the mysterious. We let the moment go in order to live in new holy obedience. The moment. The worship moves from being an opiate or an escape to being the catapult of response. We adventure forward with the Spirit, following the commands to go, love, free, cry out, uplift. And as Apostle Paul says, worship teaches and admonishes us by letting the word of Jesus Christ dwell deeply and compel our hearts into song of voice and action. With Christ deep within us, we become, and by worship we respond as reconcilers to those who need reconciling. God still does the work, but we point the way to God. We illuminate the moment as the sacred moment it is to those who can't see, and we help others hold and live both holy expectancy and holy obedience. The mystery at the heart of the universe becomes a both and truth. It's present already as we come into worship with holy expectancy, and it's present in the embodiment as we go out with holy obedience. Diana Butler Bass wrote in her book, Grounded, that encountering God and worshiping is both a vertical experience of God, the one who is both with us and up there, as in heaven, and a horizontal experience, where God is one who is here and out there on the edge of the horizon. God is the God with us in the world and neighbors, enfolding heaven and earth together. So what holy expectancy do we bring? What holy obedience do we offer? Not long ago, a member who had missed the previous Sunday's worship experience asked me how it went. My quick response was fine. It was a good day. All of a sudden, I caught my breath. Yeah, Sundays are work days for me. But normal? Regular? Unmoving? I wasn't even the preacher that day, and that's what I said? And I followed up, wow, I want more. I want to anticipate more. I want to expect surprise in worship. Holy expectancy. On another occasion of worship, that beautiful Christmas Eve service of my youth caught me in tears. No, the a cappella anthem was not to blame. And no, the candlelit sanctuary didn't stir up any emotion. I cried because I had phoned in my participation. I think I was reading scripture or saying a simple prayer, and I recall just flubbing it up. Maybe no one else noticed, but I did. I hadn't practiced or even considered the need. Worship and my part were just no big deal. All said and done, I sunk into the low, arrogant place, not taking seriously that God would change me regardless of how I showed up. God would continue to invite me into holy obedience within the sanctuary, out. Worship as the ordered way of acting and living so that God can transform us comes into the mystery, through the mystery, and out of the mystery. With holy expectancy, we become aware of moments and God's ever-present reality, given freely, unmerited, and unforced. With holy obedience, we become people who seek and then love to love. We become people who put ourselves in the way of being changed, perhaps first by definition, maybe by tradition or repetition. But for sure we are transformed in the mystery that is at the heart of the universe. Amen. We get to taste and know this goodness that is at the heart of the universe as we share together in the Holy Communion.